Hello and welcome to On the Same Page. I'm Tommy Sanders. I heard a new expression the other day, grit lit. And when you first hear that expression, you don't know really whether they're talking about, writing with a southern setting, that kind of grits, or a gritty, hard-boiled detective novel. Well, in the case of today's book, we've actually got a little bit of both. And it's got an interesting title as well, our book today. It's Arkansas, the first novel by John Brandon. So we're going to have a conversation with John Brandon, then get together with our panel of Arkansas readers to discuss Arkansas on the Same Page. All right, so we're ready to go with John Brandon and the book Arkansas. And just a quick note as we start off here, if you're sort of thinking Arkansas is about a bunch of lovable, tough but gritty Arkansans who overcome all the odds and wind up in a great place, we maybe need to set you straight. This is a different sort of story, and I don't want to categorize it, John, but why don't you just sort of, however you feel comfortable doing it, setting the story up for us of Arkansas. It's a little bit more of a dark side kind of deal, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you have your two main characters, Swin and Kyle. Couple of young men who end up in Arkansas different ways. Swin was more cut out for university life, but couldn't make it work, and Kyle really just ran out of family and options where he was, and they end up as partners, and running drugs. And Kyle's really good at it. Swin not so much. But they're not too bad of a team. They get along pretty good for a little while there until their boss dies, and that's when they realize that they really don't know anything, and they have to just figure things out from there. And I guess that's where things start going wrong for them.
Why did you pick Arkansas as the setting for this story?
Well, from the feeling that I got every time I was in the state, which is just that anything could be going on. I felt like I could go anywhere in the book and it wouldn't be too outlandish, because it just felt to me, driving through it, or the weekends that I'd spent here and there, that I had no idea what was going on over the next hill, around the next corner. It just could have been anything.
Sometimes it is.
Yeah, sometimes it is. And I think writers get that feeling from all different places. For some people, it's the big city, but for me, for some reason, it's not. It's just something about Arkansas. It's mysterious, and I felt like I like writing about a place that I have a strong feeling about, but I haven't spent a lot of time there, because I don't want to know it too well. If you know it too well, to me, then you can't. It's not as easy to make up what you need to make up.
Sure. And it's a fiction, too. I mean, I will say, reading the book, that it's not exactly geographically right on
right.
everything. And there are towns that we know. There are also some towns that are in the novel that don't exist in the state of Arkansas. And,
yeah.
So you're taking a little bit of license, which is, I guess, to be forgiven, because it's a good story and it moves on good. And you're from Florida originally,
yeah.
Born and raised in Florida. And, of course, a lot of the crime novels and sort of dark side stories from famous authors come from down there, and now that's maybe, I guess we're moving away from Miami and Chicago and New York for the crime, and we're moving out into rural America, which, from what you read, that's the way the crime's going sometimes too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think of it that way, and Florida is just too familiar for me. It doesn't, I don't feel like there's possibilities there.
Yeah.
Like I feel when I think about Arkansas. And yeah, like you said, it's, if you really tried to track it all out and make a map, probably my towns move a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
And some of them don't exist.
The hills of Felsenthal are probably not something you'd find very easy to see, because there aren't any there.
Right.
But that's secondary to the story, and of course I think anyone who reads the novel will go along with it and buy into it. Most of us are fans of this sort of genre, of crime, sort of existential crisis novels like that find the dark side a good fodder for storytelling. Is that something that's always you've been drawn to, something that's always sort of excited you and inspired your writing?
Well, this is the most plot-driven thing that I've ever written, and I found it very freeing to have more plot than ever, because I didn't have to worry so much about where things were going. I could just idle and have the characters talk, spend as much time I want on setting, but I knew that it's okay because this plot is going to push through one way or another. And they're always driving somewhere, which always gives me, new setting, new people they're going to run into.
More possibilities.
Yeah, more possibilities. So it can get quite episodic, I guess, in stretches, where they're just going to this place and the next place. And that seems like it's in my wheelhouse, when I'm writing that stuff. If I can get them talking and get them out on the road, that's when it feels right to me.
That's where things happen. The excitement is pretty strong. I mean, the energy is pretty high all the way through it, and the storytelling is good. The third character, I would say the third character. Well, there's a third and a fourth character. Jonna, who's the girlfriend of Swin, and there's Froggy, who's their boss, the drug czar, sort of what passes for a drug czar in Arkansas. His story is told from a different point of view, a second person sort of type, and it works good. Why did you choose that, though?
Well, Frog's story starts back in time. I don't know what it is, 25, 30 years. Yeah. So I wanted to be able to set him apart from the present, and not have the reader get confused. Well, what year is it? Why is he there at the same time they're there? So I switched the point of view there, and I also feel like it's kind of neat that the reader is the villain. The reader is identified as the person who's trying to kill the protagonists. Yeah. So the readers kind of just follows themselves as they try to catch up to Kyle and Swin. So when I first did it, I really didn't know what the reason was, but I had to ask myself, is this okay?
It's a great device. I think it works pretty well.
Yeah, the more I went with it, the better it felt.
These characters, as low life as they are, and all the evil things they're involved in, but especially Kyle and Swin, the two protagonists, why do we find ourselves rooting for these guys? I mean, and I would think anyone who reads a novel kind of would. It's not that everyone else is that much worse than they are, but somehow you're sort of rooting for them. They're I guess they're just quirky enough.
Yeah,
maybe
I
you don't root for them.
I definitely do root for them, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure why. I guess characters don't have to always do the right thing, but as long as you understand why they're doing what they're doing, I guess you're going to get on their side. Yeah. Before too long.
Do you have any kind of reader in mind when you wrote this book? Any generation or type of person, type of reader?
No, I really don't think about that. I don't really think that way. I guess it may not be the right thing to say, but I guess I'm the reader that I'm writing for.
Writing it for yourself.
I mean, all I can do is when I look at it, if I don't get bored, then I think, well, maybe somebody else won't either. So
I always ask that question. I always get the same answer, so maybe I'll retire the question. It seems pretty steady on that. Let's talk a little bit about your background. You say you grew up, you're born and raised in Central Florida, and you lived a number of places during the course of writing this book, right?
Yeah, I started writing this about the same time as my wife took a traveling job where she has to move every 3 to 6 months. So wherever we would go, I would just get whatever job was easiest that I could get. Not that the jobs are easy, but easy to get. Okay. So I'd go to the temp agency, and they said, well, we have this if you start tomorrow. So that's what I would do.
What kind of jobs came up?
Oh, in Oregon, it was a lumber mill where they made wooden arrows.
Really?
I guess that's for kids or junior high schools or something. I don't know what they were for. Let's see, in Phoenix, just a factory, New Mexico factory. In Providence, let's see, trying to think of any that are a little more exciting. In Virginia Beach, I worked at a place where we made these really nice, fancy wooden diploma frames.
Oh, really? Yeah.
It was a pretty big operation, that was pretty good. Let's see, worked in a place where they make the little perfume samples and cologne,
like in magazines,
lotion samples that
yeah,
go in magazines.
Right. Yeah. Get free lotion or anything like that? No.
The guy who I worked with, somehow he'd always have a tub of that Neutrogena, stuff, so we could get that whenever we wanted.
And these 8-hour, 40-hour week jobs, I guess, and you ride around that sort of, huh?
Well, it works really well for me because there was a point where I tried to teach high school, and I taught for a whole semester, and I didn't write a word the whole time because by the time I got home, I just didn't want to look at any papers, pens, computers.
The world of words did not appeal to you after a day of words. Huh?
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And you got to bring your work home.
Yeah.
And lesson plan and do all that kind of stuff. But if you go punch in at the factory at 6 in the morning and you punch out at 2:30, I haven't, you don't think that much doing the kind of labor I was doing. You don't have to think about
thought
it.
Of that.
And you get home, take a little nap, and my mind would be fresh, so I could write pretty much every evening, as long as I wanted to. So that worked out.
Yeah. And you wrapped up the book last year in 2007, picked up by a company. Tell us about the company that publishes this book here.
McSweeney's, I guess some people haven't heard of them at all, and to some people they're the best thing that's ever happened. But they're in San Francisco, and they just do a whole bunch of different things. They have a quarterly that's short fiction, and they have this Wolf in here, which is I think it's probably quarterly too, but it's a DVD
short films
of short films, and they get some interesting / famous people to be involved in those things. And then, they do all different sorts of books. They do, novels like this, but if you go to their website, there's just dozens of different books they do. And then they have these tutoring centers. They must have about half a dozen of them or something that are in big cities. That are, just the one in San Francisco is right down the street from their offices. They just try to help tutor kids and stuff. And they're always having benefits for those. They'll get a bunch of comedians or something together. And
that's great.
So
ambitious company. Yeah.
It
so
is.
You've hooked up with them, and it's available through them and in books and the major bookstores as well. So we can find it there.
Yeah.
John Brandon, before we let you go, we're going to get you to read a part of your book, Arkansas, for us. We've talked about a selection. You want to hit that right now? Set it up for us first.
Yeah. This is the point where Swin has been in Arkansas for a while, and he's got some distance from university life, but he's on his way back. He's passing through Nashville, where he used to go to school, on his way to Kentucky to see his sister, and he just stops in Nashville, and I guess he's got to think about this decision that he's made to leave. Let's see. It took forever to get past Little Rock, but then Memphis and Jackson whipped by, and Swin was bearing down on Nashville. He decided to stop for lunch at an upscale Asian place just off the Vanderbilt campus. He saw the medical building and the stadium in a shady spot where he used to sit with a book and watch girls in shorts walk by. It was like he'd only been gone a week. The same banners hung up over the same walkways. The same signs were tacked to the same telephone poles. Kids dressed like vampires scuttled from corner to corner. Kids in ties and hunting hats. Eastern Europeans reading Tennessee Williams. Krishnas. There was 24-hour sushi delivery and little foam coolers embossed with dragons. Laptops, Marxists, espresso. Swin felt at home and alive in this jumble of ambition, this mess of intent. He ate grilled duck, enjoying the underthump of foreign hip-hop, trying to convince himself that the grass was always greener, that if he ever got back to a university, he would get sick of it. Of what, though? He loved it all, and now he was an intruder here. He heard a familiar voice, one of his old professors, the guy that had confronted Swin about his gold chains, walked by with a spiffy middle-aged woman. Swin put his hands in front of his face. He was so jealous it felt like his ribs were straightening. He couldn't get up from his table. He ordered tea and prepared it and sniffed it. It tasted bad, but Swin was going to drink the whole miniature pot. He would never be a professor. This knowledge was an old wind that had just grown cold. Now that he'd been out in the world earning money, setting his own schedule, committing felonies, how would he ever fit into a place where you got pissy at copy machines and devised attendance policies? Swin had to get the idea of cushy professorship out of his head. No one would want him. They'd want a token Rican who strove for gold stars, a Rican they could set up next to their token black guy and token Eskimo woman. Swin felt betrayed by his mind. He put both hands on the table and lowered his face to the steaming tea. If he ever lived in a college town, it would be as a hanger-on, one of those two old young guys that the students looked at sidelong, or as a drug dealer. Universities didn't hire people with diverse backgrounds. They hired people with similar backgrounds who appeared different. They wanted you to have been reading Young and Plato and Henry James in Trinidad rather than in Maryland. They wanted accents. It had never occurred to Swin that his life was tragic, but it was. His sadness was a stiff jacket that his mind was racing to shed. His mind was fumbling with the zippers and buttons. He gulped his tea. There we go.
It's from Arkansas, John Brandon. John, thank you for stopping by on the same page today.
Thanks for having me.
Good luck with the book. We look forward to your next work as well, and we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get with our panel of readers to talk about this book, Arkansas. So here we go. We're going to take up the subject of the book Arkansas with our readers here. I'd like to introduce them to you. Carla Koen, a Little Rock resident who spent plenty of time in reading-related occupations, in the newspaper business, the publishing business as well. And readers all over Arkansas know Rod Lorenzen. For many, many years, the proprietor of a very, very famous, popular bookstore in Little Rock. And thank you both for being here today. We really appreciate it. Thank you for reading the book, taking the time. Arkansas, I would imagine a lot of people are going to buy it just based on the title, you know. But I want to ask you all first, and I'll start with you, Carla. How much real Arkansas did you find in this book?
The title is about about as deep into Arkansas as it went. I, having had the background as being an editor, sort of picked it apart on that reason. As the descriptions of Hot Springs and Pine Bluff and Fort Smith and Magnet Cove came in, I sort of, it was very obvious that John has a good imagination.
Yeah, he sort of uses it like a chef uses chicken, just as a palette to apply flavors to.
Exactly.
You know? Rod, did you get that impression?
Yes, I did. There's not too much in there that identifies it, I don't think, as an Arkansas book. It's set during the 1980s, and he does have a couple of references to the Arkansas Texas Longhorn rivalry. And one of the customers, one of the characters has a mug that says, "I hate Texas from the minute I get up." So I got a kick out of that.
So you have to pay attention to the time references and everything. Carla, you and I were talking before we got going here about the hills, the mountains of Pine Bluff.
Oh yes, the craggy, fog-shrouded Pine Bluff, which, as we all know, is
and John Brandon, in his defense, as he said in the interview, he said, "Well, it's a fiction book, and it's as such, the lawyers didn't have to vet it or anything like that. So that's the way it went." What did you think, Rod, of the narrative, and who do you think this kind of story would appeal to?
I think the narrative was really good. It's sort of told from the point of view of where the author knows what's going on inside every character's head. In the old days, we would call that central intelligence. But I thought it was narrated really well. The writing is really crisp. Carla and I kind of agree on this, that we think it's probably a guy book.
It's an absolute guy book.
It's a guy book.
It is.
Explain that, Carla.
A little bit of gore, a little bit of gristle,
Yeah, good bit of,
some
yeah.
oozing.
Yes, plenty of violence, lots of violence.
A lot of violence. Body count's pretty high.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's, it kind of reminds me of the 1930s detective writers like Raymond Chandler or Dashiell Hammett. It's a hard-boiled story,
Very
pretty
much.
gritty, and but it's a good story.
Well, how about it when these hard-boiled crime stories now move from the old Raymond Chandler Los Angeles or Chicago or Miami of just a few decades ago now to rural Arkansas? What does that tell us? Is that something that disturbs us, do you think?
Well, a little bit. I mean, I think, you know, on one hand it says that, you know, criminals involved in drugs want to be in out-of-the-way places.
Yeah.
They want to be isolated, and so certainly there are places in Arkansas that fit that, and this is set in kind of an out-of-the-way state park in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Well, and we're absolutely a crime haven. I mean, sadly,
Sure,
like
yeah,
like
that
every
is the
other
sad
state,
truth.
but we do have a huge drug crime.
People living in places,
problem
Rod said,
here.
where law enforcement can't get to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's unfortunate truth. Well, let's talk about the two criminals who are the main characters in here, the sort of disaffected folks, Kyle and Swin. How well do you think they were developed, Carla?
I like the development of them, and I love the name Swin Ruiz. It's the first thing in the book that you read, and it's a well-chosen name because it's memorable. I liked the differences in the two. I liked that one thought he was the smarter of the two,
Sure.
whereas Swin thought he was the smarter of the two, but Kyle sort of let him think that quite a bit, and I liked that about them.
And their backgrounds, you think their backgrounds were fleshed out enough to explain why they were in the situation?
I think it makes it clear that both of those characters had some problems growing up. They came from broken families. And yeah, still, I found it difficult to like these characters. Basically, they are criminals, and I think if the writing hadn't been as good as it was, I probably wouldn't have liked this book much. But I liked the book pretty well.
Yeah. Now, I found myself not liking them and sometimes rooting for them.
Yeah.
Which is that's a little perverse, I guess. But you know, I don't know. I guess that's sort of a parlor trick of the author to make you sort of pull for people who are so disaffected and obviously capable of bad things. I don't know. It's interesting. It's something you might, if you read the book, you might check yourself along the way and see if that starts to happen to you. Who do you think are the influences of the author John Brandon? Who do you think?
I'm going to have to
Shapes his
defer
view.
that sentence, that question to Rod.
Rod,
He's
who
a
would
lot
you say?
more.
Well, it really, again, I would go back to Raymond Chandler and maybe a more recent author like James Elroy, who writes that kind of hard-bitten crime story.
Yeah.
And someone like that. But again, I think it brings us back to what I thought probably was one of the major themes with the characters was their struggle for intimacy. And I think what you were saying, sometimes you pulled for them and sometimes you didn't.
Yeah, maybe that's the key to it right there. That's a good point.
But I think they've got this going on, and I think it's kind of a desperate struggle for him. Swin has sisters that he's had to leave, and he thinks about them all the time.
Worries about them.
And cares about them.
Yeah.
And so we have kind of that struggle for intimacy going on, I think. And with both of these guys, and they're trying to find that. But like a lot of us, or like a lot of characters, they, this is what they're looking for. But on the other hand, it seems like they're scared to death of it at the same time.
Sure. Yeah. They can't make it work right
Yes.
somehow or another.
Yeah.
Were there parts of the book that entertained you, that drew you in and rolled you along more than others, Carla?
I read the book almost straight through, so I think it's a page turner. I mean, he does have a wonderful ability to make you want to read what's coming next. And because it's not really written in chapters, it's sort of written in episodes. It sort of forces you to propel a little bit quicker than you might in a short story or a book with short chapters. I can't just read a page or two and put it down, so I just kind of zipped right through.
the third major character, whom they never interact with, really, is Froggy, the character, the sort of criminal mastermind, or at least comes to be the criminal mastermind from Memphis. All his chapters written in a second person sort of thing, and then first person at the very end. What did you think of that, DeVars?
I thought it was interesting to. I mean, this is sort of the mystery in the book, who this frog person is, and what he's about. And when our two main characters get into trouble, they're concerned that Frog's going to come get them.
Yeah. So he's a force. He's sort of a force that's out there, unseen. Well, we talked about, and other reviews I've read too, talked about the very cinematic quality of this novel. Do you think there's a movie coming out? Do you think it's going to be the next No Country for Old Men or something like that?
It definitely high body count, lots of action, drugs and crime, and absolutely, it could easily be a screenplay.
Will not be a chick flick, though, right?
Not a chick. Well, there's a little love in there.
There's Jonah, the other character. And maybe that could be expanded a little bit. What do you think, Rod? Do you think it's going to be a movie?
Yeah, I think it's so tersely written that it would certainly lend itself to a movie script. Yeah.
Assess this one. Get on a scale of 1 to 10 for a first time published author. What would you give this?
Oh, I'd give this a 9.
Yeah. Carla?
I'm gonna go a little lower and probably go 6.5, 7.
6.5.
Yeah.
See, that's who he's writing for. Right? He's writing for Rod. He's not writing for Carla. Carla, Koen, Rod Lorenzen, thank you all very much for coming up here, for reading the book. The book again, Arkansas by John Brandon. So if it's just maybe they should put a disclaimer on it that it's not really the Arkansas that you may know, but it's sort of the setting for a fictional, sort of hard-boiled, grit-lit. I think that the word's been thrown around. Crime novel. So check it out, Arkansas by John Brandon. Thank you for joining us on the same page today.
For more information about AETN Presents On the Same Page and Arkansas by John Brandon, please visit aetn.org/onthesamepage.